What is up, boys and girls? Time for another edition of Video Games and Romeo and Juliet. And today we are looking at Act 3, Scene 1. This is one of the most critical scenes in the entire play. You can make an argument that outside of the final scene, that this might be the most important scene that takes place. This is the turning point in the play. And I think there's really no better game that can capture the chaos of this scene than some Super Smash Brothers. Now, let me break this down for y'all. As you know, I'm a older individual, and Super Smash Brothers came out, I was like 10 years old on the original N64 when this came out. So I've definitely been playing this for a while now. This isn't the game I play the most, and I will tell you this most recent iteration that I have not played a ton of. However, I do enjoy me some Samus, especially on battles that are more than just one-on-one. So that's who we're going to pick. We're going to pick some Samus, and we're going to play some Super Smash Brothers while we talk about Act 3, Scene 1. So the key context to this scene is it is right after our lovebirds, Romeo and Juliet, have gotten married. And everyone else on Romeo's side still thinks that Romeo is in love with Rosaline. And on your Act 2 quiz, remember you kind of missed that question of, you know, who do they think he is still in love with? They still think it's Rosaline. They have no idea about Juliet. It has important context to this. And you will also remember that Tybalt wants to fight Romeo because he saw Romeo at the party, and he thinks that that's a pretty big sin. And remember, he had to kind of get talked down off a ledge to not fight Romeo. So he had issued that letter to fight Romeo. So the scene kind of starts out where Benvolio and Mercutio are kind of hanging out. And, you know, Mercutio's just kind of being Mercutio and kind of an oddball, and that's just what he does. And Tybalt comes rolling up, and he's like, hey guys, I want to fight Romeo. Like, where is this guy? And, you know, Mercutio, being Mercutio, being kind of an oddball, is kind of poking the bear with Tybalt. Like, he's not one that is going to kind of back down from a situation like this. He kind of has this approach of like, okay, like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, yeah, you're Tybalt, you like to fight. I'm not really scared of you. Let's go. So he's kind of trolling Tybalt, you could say, in this. And Romeo comes strolling up while these two are kind of having a back and forth. And keep in mind, Romeo again just got married, so he is in a very good mood. The problem is that nobody else knows that Romeo just got married outside of the nurse and the Friar Lawrence. So if you are Tybalt, you have no idea that he just married your cousin. If you're Benvolio or Mercutio, for all you know, Romeo's still in love with Rosaline. You have no idea about this Juliet. So there's a lot of misunderstanding that goes into this, and as a result, it leads to some dramatic irony, because, like, we know that, okay, Romeo doesn't want to fight anymore. Because now technically Tybalt is family to him. And so he even says that as much. He goes, you don't understand, but Tybalt, I love you, thee. Because Tybalt is part of his family. Well, Tybalt has no time for this, and in the process of him and Romeo kind of going back and forth. Mercutio is like, all right, man, come on. Mercutio's kind of like, all right, you want to go, man? Like, let's go. And ultimately, that's what they do. Now, something to point out: if you are only reading the script of Shakespeare, and you're not seeing this acted out in a performance, is when you're reading the script, it just kind of says, okay, they fight, and then the next action and the result of the fight happens. If you were to watch this in, one of the couple movies that are out there, or in a play version, this fight scene could take as long as 5+ minutes to do. If you're just reading it, just says they fight. Well, again, depending on the director and how long he wants it to go, there's a lot of directions you can go with the fight. And so you might miss, and this is kind of one of the key points in this, is that in the course of this fight, that Romeo tries to play peacemaker, which is kind of Benvolio's role, but Romeo kind of takes that mantle. And it will say in the script that Romeo steps in between Mercutio and Tybalt, and to try to break up this fight, because he's like, guys, stop fighting, which is not like Romeo at all to this point, because he's just like, oh, Romeo, I'm so sad. As I came in dead last, again, you would never know that I used to play this game. -3, great work. So he's like, guys, stop fighting. And he's just like, oh, normally he's like, oh, I'm so sad. So what happens, and if you see this in your script, is Romeo steps in between Tybalt and Mercutio. And when he does that, Tybalt takes kind of advantage of this and goes and stabs Mercutio underneath Romeo's arm. And this inevitably is going to kill off Mercutio. Now, it does not happen instantaneously, and you will note that at first Mercutio's kind of playing it off, and because it's within Mercutio's character, he's just going like, it's a scratch, and he's kind of stumbling around, and everyone's just kind of playing it off, and no one suspects that anything wrong is happening. But then it's kind of revealed like, that this is beyond just a scratch. And he says right before he dies, he's like, well, why did you step between me? And Romeo's like, I was trying to stop this. And so Mercutio, right at the end, right before he dies, kind of has this, I don't know, the truth comes out of what he really thinks about all the conflict that's taken place and all the fighting, because at the end of the day, all of this fighting has led to his life. And he says right before he dies, a curse upon both of your houses, and then he does pass away. Well, now we have a problem, because Tybalt is now a murderer. He just killed a guy in the streets of Verona. So, in reality, based on what we know from the prince, that if they just let this be and let this kind of play out, there's a good chance that, this would not end well for Tybalt. Well, this death has kind of awoken something inside of Romeo that typically we haven't seen. The first couple acts in the play, especially when he was in love with Rosaline, if Mercutio were to die at the hands of Tybalt, Romeo might have just gone, oh, that's so sad, but oh well. It is what it is. Oh, I'll deal with it. Well, Romeo, now that he's married apparently, is a brand new man. And so instead, he goes, I'm not cool with this for a second. I'm not cool with this at all. So, you know what? I'm going to fight you. And so he keeps kind of calling out Tybalt, and he literally chases down Tybalt and goes, all right, you know what? We're going to fight, and I have to defend the honor of my friend. Now, again, depending on the director, if you were to watch this in a movie or a real-life play, you have a lot of interpretations of how you could do this. There's a 1969 version of this play by Frank Zeffirelli, and the fight scene between Romeo and Tybalt plays out probably a solid 5 minutes when he does this in real life. Then there's a more modern version that came out in the 90s, which features Leonardo DiCaprio and was directed by Baz Luhrmann. And this, quote, fight scene between Romeo and Tybalt, that part only takes, less than 30 seconds. Romeo chases him down and then engages in this fight. And the key thing that comes out from this fight is Romeo gets the upper hand, and he winds up stabbing Tybalt to the point where now Tybalt dies. So I told you the scene was wild. You have two deaths in this scene. You have Mercutio, and then Romeo, defending Mercutio's honor, goes and kills Tybalt. Well, now we got all sorts of problems on our hands. Now the citizens of the Watch show up, and again, you have to keep in mind what the prince had told them. He said, if you fight again in the streets, I'm going to have you executed. Those were his instructions. And so now the citizens of the Watch show up, and they tell Romeo, and they're like, be gone, Romeo, be gone. And so Romeo runs away. And this is obviously going to create a lot of problems because the dude just got married. And generally, I don't know about you, but I can promise you that on the night that I got married, that I didn't kill anyone that night. Went back to the hotel room, and that was the end of the night. No murder involved. So Romeo kind of runs away. See, did better that time with Bowser. Not totally incompetent at this game. And so Romeo runs away. And what happens in the last couple pages of this scene is the prince comes rolling up. And, we haven't seen the prince for a while, but remember the prince is in charge. It's like, hey guys, what just happened? And one thing that tends to happen in Shakespeare is there's a lot of explanation to the audience of things they already just saw. In case you weren't paying attention, you daydreamed or you wandered or whatever. Lady Capulet kind of explains like, hey, wait a second. Tybalt, who is her nephew, is dead. But that's not cool. And Benvolio is trying to explain, well, the only reason that Tybalt's dead is because he murdered Mercutio and Romeo was defending his honor. So where this scene kind of lays off and why this scene is a big twist in it is beyond the death of Tybalt and Mercutio. The prince goes, okay, I get it that Tybalt probably had it coming. However, I can't just let Romeo walk free. So what he has decided is that Romeo is banished. And that just means he's kicked out of Verona and not allowed to return. And if he is to return to Verona, that he will be executed pretty much on sight. So Romeo has run away. He's been told he's banished. One other minor thing that comes out in the prince's speech is that he actually had a connection to Mercutio. It turned out they were actually related. Not a major detail, but that does come out in that. But the big takeaway from this is that Tybalt and Mercutio are dead, and Romeo has been kicked out of Verona, which is a problem when you just got married, that you have been now kicked out of the city where your wife lives, and you can't come back. So, we'll see how this turns out for our lovers. As you can see, again, I did a lot better with Bowser than I did with Samus. Both original N64 characters. Fun fact. So, this has been Act 3, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet. Hopefully you take your Act 2 quiz. That would be a good thing to do. I'm just suggesting. And I will see you next time for Act 3, Scene 2. Take care.